had a gig in Arco Arena in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Flying to San Francisco, and Ronnie gets off the plane.
Country legend Ronnie Dunn has just shattered decades of silence with a confession that will change everything you thought you knew about Brooks and Dunn. After giving us Neon Moon, he sat alone, questioning if anyone wanted to hear his voice without his famous partner. The camera caught him walking off stage, mid-song, tapping his heart, looking broken. What destroyed country music's biggest duo? Could the truth about their split be more shocking than anyone imagined? Join us as Ronnie Dunn tells it all at 71. Disturbing health scare. The lights were blinding inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis that Thursday night. Brooks and Dunn had just kicked off their set, and the crowd, all 20,000 of them, were already fired up, singing every word of Boot Scootin' Boogie like it was 1992 all over again. Kix Brooks was doing his thing on one side of the stage, guitar in hand, feeding off the energy like a pro. But then, something felt off. Ronnie Dunn was front and center, gripping the mic with both hands. Same voice, same grit that could make you cry during Neon Moon or lift your soul with My Maria. But as the song hit its peak, something changed. He slowed down. His movements got heavy. The guy who'd spent years owning the stage just didn't seem like himself under those massive lights. The bassist noticed first, just a tiny shake of Ronnie's head. The crowd missed it, but the band didn't. They've been through it all together. Long tours, bad nights, sickness, exhaustion. But this wasn't just being tired, it felt different. Somewhere in the crowd, radio host Matt Malone was recording on his phone. He caught it, that quiet gut punch moment before everything changed. Ronnie looked toward his bandmates. No words, just a look. The kind that only makes sense when you've played 1,000 shows together. The audience kept singing, clapping, and having a great time. No one realized they were watching a moment that was going to blow up online just a few hours later. Then Ronnie started walking slowly toward the front of the stage. You could tell he didn't want to, like this wasn't part of the plan. But he got to the edge, looked out at the sea of fans, and did something that hit harder than any note he's ever sung. He held out his arms, not in that "thank you, good night" kind of way. It was softer, like he was saying thanks and goodbye at the same time. He tapped his chest, right over his heart, and waved. That's when the murmur started. People were like, "Wait, what's going on?" And then he walked off stage, just like that. Kix and the rest of the band kept playing, but it was clear something big had just happened. Backstage, it was chaos. Nobody really knew what was going on yet, and the crowd were still trying to make sense of it all. Malone posted the video the next day, just a short clip, captioned, "Feel better, Ronnie." And man, it took off. Thousands of likes, shares, and comments. People were worried. The comments were full of folks saying how Ronnie's music helped them through breakups, deployments, and tough years. For a lot of people, this wasn't just a concert moment. It was personal. Speculation went wild. Was he sick or just exhausted? Or was it something more serious? Country music forums were lit up. These weren't just fans. These were people who had grown up with Brooks and Dunn on the radio, at their weddings, in their old pickup trucks. Ronnie and Kix weren't just famous. They were familiar. By the start of a new week, the official word came in. A spokesperson said Ronnie wasn't feeling well from being sick during the encore. That was it. No drama, no details, just a short line to calm the storm. It helped in a way, but people wanted more. When you've followed someone for 30, 40 years, you want to know they're okay. Especially someone like Ronnie, who's never been the kind to bail mid-show. The real moment of truth came Saturday at the next stop on the tour, Rosemont, Illinois. Everyone was asking the same thing. Would he show up? He did. And not just show up. He crushed it. Same fire, same voice, same everything. The man's 71, and he still knows how to light up an arena. That night proved that whatever happened in Indy, it wasn't the end. Still, the whole thing stuck with people. It was like watching your dad or your favorite uncle admit he just couldn't keep going for a moment. It was human and kind of heartbreaking, but also kind of powerful, because he came back, finished the tour, and kept going. That's the part fans will remember too, not just the stumble, but the comeback. There were 3 more shows left on the New Moon Tour after that. 3 more chances to show that, yeah, time might slow you down, but it doesn't erase what made you great in the first place. But the real story started long before the fame, back when it was just 2 guys chasing a sound, not a spotlight. How did 2 separate paths end up creating one of country music's most iconic duos? Preacher turns superstar. Back in 1953, on the dusty streets of Coleman, Texas, a baby boy named Ronnie Dunn came into the world. Nobody back then would have guessed that one day his voice would echo through packed stadiums all over the country. He was just a regular kid from a working-class family. Sundays were for church, Wednesdays for prayer meetings. That was just how life went. Everyone figured he'd grow up to be a Baptist preacher, just like the ones he listened to every week. When Ronnie got to Hardin-Simmons University, he threw himself into his studies. His books were full of scriptures and sermon notes, but deep down, something else was pulling at him. It wasn't the pulpit, it was music. While his dorm mates stayed up reading the Bible, Ronnie would sneak off with his bass guitar, playing around with melodies that felt way more natural to him than anything he read in class. It was like he was living a double life. By day, he was a preacher in training. By night, he was playing music in smoky bars and little honky-tonks around Texas. And the thing was, those late-night gigs gave him something theology never could. The music connected with people. It was raw and real and messy in a way that just hit differently. Eventually, the school found out what he was up to, and they weren't having it. They told him flat out he had to choose: be a preacher or be a musician. He couldn't do both. Ronnie picked the bass, and just like that, he was kicked out. His family was crushed. His whole plan for life fell apart overnight, and for a while, he didn't know what was next. Meanwhile, about 400 miles away in Shreveport, Louisiana, a kid named Leon Eric Brooks, who would later go by Kix, was having a different kind of upbringing. His neighborhood was soaked in music. One of his neighbors was Johnny Horton, the country legend. So for Kix, chasing music wasn't some big dramatic thing. It just made sense. He knew what he wanted and went for it, heading to Nashville in 1976, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Kix got to work fast. He started writing songs for other people and, honestly, crushed it. He penned hits like "I'm Only in It for the Love" for John Conlee and "Modern Day Romance" for the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band. These songs went to #1, and Nashville started seeing him as one of those writers you could count on to deliver. While Kix was on the rise, Ronnie was still trying to figure things out. After leaving school, he put out a couple of singles in the early 80s with a small label, but they didn't go anywhere. One song peaked at number 59, definitely not the big break he needed. And for someone who'd already given up everything for music, that kind of almost success just made things worse. The doubts crept in. Did he blow it by walking away from the church? Then something weird happened. In 1989, a drummer friend named Jamie Oldaker secretly entered Ronnie into a talent contest sponsored by Marlboro. Ronnie didn't even know about it, but he won, and the prize was a recording session in Nashville. After years of grinding, this felt like a tiny sliver of hope. That session ended up changing everything. The producer, Scott Hendricks, heard Ronnie sing and immediately thought, "This guy's got something." He passed the tapes along to a big shot at Arista Nashville named Tim Dubois. Now, Dubois had a knack for spotting hidden talent, and when he heard Ronnie's voice, he thought it needed something, or maybe someone, to bring out its full power. That's when Dubois remembered Kix. Even though Kix was already successful behind the scenes, Dubois saw something more in him, like he was meant to be on stage, not just writing songs for other people. So he did something bold. He introduced Ronnie and Kix. They had never met. They didn't know each other at all. But Dubois had a feeling their opposite personalities might click. Their first meeting was a kind of awkward. They were feeling each other out, not sure if this was going to work. But then they sat down to write a song together, and something just clicked. It wasn't forced. It wasn't polished. It just worked. They put together a demo, and it blew up right away. Suddenly, they had a record deal, and by June 1991, they were releasing their first single, Brand New Man. What happened next was something nobody saw coming. That first album pumped out 4 #1 hits in a row, something no other country duo had ever done. Overnight, they went from 2 guys with very different paths to full-on country superstars. Ronnie, who once wondered if he belonged in music at all, now had fans from coast to coast hanging onto every word he sang. The kid from Coleman had found his crowd. It just looked a little different from a church congregation. What they pulled off next would break records and redefine country music. But could 2 strangers hold it together under that kind of pressure? 20 years of domination. When Brand New Man dropped in June 1991, it kind of turned Nashville upside down. Nobody really saw it coming. Radio folks, who were used to the usual country sound, suddenly had to hustle to keep up because people were eating this new thing up. The song just kept climbing and climbing until it hit #1. And honestly, that set the tone for everything that came after. But the real shocker was what happened next. My Next Broken Heart shot up to #1 too, then Neon Moon. And after that, Boot Scootin' Boogie wrapped up the whole streak. 4 #1 hits from a debut album. That had never happened before, not for any duo in country music, ever. It was so wild that even seasoned industry folks were like, okay, is this serious talent or just some kind of freak lightning strike? And Boot Scootin' Boogie didn't just live on the radio, it took over dance floors. Suddenly, you had people all over the country doing line dances in perfect sync, like it was second nature. The song even cracked the Billboard Hot 100 and got non-country fans paying attention. Dance studios from Texas to New York were slammed with people wanting to learn the moves. It was everywhere. At the heart of all this were 2 guys who couldn't have been more different, and that's what made it work. Ronnie was the quiet type, super intense, with a voice that hit you in the chest. And then there was Kix, just full of energy, completely owning the stage. Together, it was magic, like somehow they balanced each other out in the best way. Their first album ended up selling 6 million copies, and that was just the start. Album 2, Hard Workin' Man, was another hit factory. More #1s, more radio love. Then in 1994, they grabbed a Grammy for Best Country Performance by a duo or group. At that point, it was clear these guys weren't just popular. They were the real deal. By 1996, they'd pulled off something no one thought was even possible. They won the CMA's Entertainer of the Year award. First duo to ever do it. That award usually went to solo stars with massive stage presence, but Brooks and Dunn showed the world that a duo could bring just as much firepower. Then came My Maria, a cover of a 1972 B.W. Stevenson song. It held the #1 spot for 3 weeks and was the top country song of 1996. Even Ronnie had doubts about doing a cover, but man, were they glad they did. It even crept onto the pop charts and brought in a whole new wave of fans. At this point, winning Duo of the Year was just expected. Between 1992 and 2006, they snagged the award every single year except one, 2000, when Montgomery Gentry briefly took the spotlight. But otherwise, was total domination. And not just because they were popular, every album kept showing off their range and growth. Their live shows were absolutely massive. We're talking stadiums packed with 50,000 people. Pyrotechnics lighting up the night. Stage setups that looked more like rock concerts than your typical country show. They didn't just show up to play, they made a whole experience out of it. Some of their songs even turned into full-blown American anthems. Only in America was it used in presidential campaigns by both Bush and Obama, which tells you a lot. It had that kind of hopeful vibe that just worked, no matter who you were or what you believed in. And they didn't just make music, they gave back, big time. Kix was a huge supporter of charities, especially anything related to kids and music education. In 2015, he got the first ever CMA Foundation Humanitarian Award for all the work he'd done. His Keep the Music Playing program had pumped over $11 million into Tennessee schools by then. Ronnie had his way of giving back, too. His Rock the Barn concerts, held right at his home near Nashville, raised a ton of money for places like Gilda's Club and the St. Thomas Breast Cancer Center. It wasn't just a party. It made a real difference. Their albums, almost all of them, went platinum or more. Brand New Man hit 6 times platinum. Hard Workin' Man wasn't far behind with 5. Even their greatest hits albums flew off shelves and helped introduce a whole new wave of listeners to their stuff. So when they announced they were calling it quits in 2009, it felt like the end of an era. By then, they'd racked up 20 #1 hits, 2 Grammys, and more awards than anyone could count. No other duo in country music had ever done what they did. And honestly, it's hard to imagine anyone ever topping it. But it wasn't just about the numbers. They created a style and sound that set the bar for everyone who came after. They showed the whole industry what a country duo could be, and a lot of folks are still following that blueprint today. But what happens when the music fades and the lights go out for good? What do legends do when they finally step away from the spotlight? When success became a prison. August 10, 2009. The news hit like a punch in the gut for country music fans. After 20 years of owning the charts, selling out shows, and racking up platinum records, Brooks and Dunn were calling it quits. Not because they hated each other or had some big blow-up. It was something quieter, sneakier, burnout. Total, soul-crushing burnout. Kix Brooks and Ronnie Dunn had been talking behind the scenes for a while. They'd done it all. The awards, the fame, the record sales. But somewhere along the way, the spark had faded. Sitting in green rooms and board meetings, both of them started to feel it. They were just done. Tapped out. The creativity wasn't flowing anymore. And the whole thing started to feel more like a grind than a dream. For Kix, stepping away felt kind of exciting. He had other stuff he wanted to try, radio gigs, maybe some film work. There was a whole world outside of music that he was curious about. But for Ronnie, it felt like walking off a cliff. They kicked off their farewell tour in 2010, calling it The Last Rodeo. And it was this weird mix of a party and a funeral. Night after night, Ronnie stood up there singing the songs that had shaped his adult life, all while knowing that each show was one step closer to the end. The crowds were louder than ever, but somehow, that just made everything feel heavier. When that final show wrapped up at Nashville's Bridgestone Arena on September 2nd, 2010, Ronnie was left staring down a question he couldn't shake. Who am I without Brooks and Dunn? Turns out, the answer wasn't simple, and it wasn't easy. Ronnie was 57, and the country music scene had changed a lot since he started back in 1991. Radio was leaning into younger artists. The whole sound had shifted. And just like that, the voice that had ruled country for 2 decades started to feel out of place. His first solo album dropped in June 2011, and it was good. His voice was still unmistakable, and the songs were solid. But country radio didn't care. DJs who used to line up to play Brooks and Dunn singles didn't touch his solo stuff, and that stung a lot. Recording sessions stopped being fun. Ronnie would walk into the studio just dragging this weight of doubt behind him. He started questioning everything: his voice, his songwriting, even whether he deserved to be there at all. That confidence he'd carried for years started to crack. People around him noticed. The guy who used to be this mix of chill and intensity started pulling back. He stopped showing up to things. Most days, he'd rather stay holed up at his farm outside Nashville than face the music scene that suddenly felt like it had no place for him. Mentally, it took a huge toll. For years, Ronnie had been half of something huge. The Brooks and Dunn brand gave him purpose, identity, and it meant something. Without it, he felt stuck, like the whole world was moving on without him. He'd lie awake at night wondering if this was it, if the ride was over. Even interviews started to feel like a chore. He'd smile and keep it together, but underneath, he could feel it. The way radio folks looked at him now. Respectful, sure, but unsure. Like they didn't know what to do with him anymore. In 2014, he gave it another go with a second solo album under Arista Nashville. Critics liked it. The songs were heartfelt. But still, it didn't connect commercially. Ronnie couldn't help but think maybe his sound just didn't fit the new country vibe anymore. Maybe his moment had passed, and the isolation got worse. What used to be a peaceful retreat on the farm started feeling like a cage. He'd walk around for hours, stuck in his head, replaying all the doubts and fears. The guy who once filled stadiums with joy was now wondering if anyone even cared to hear his voice again. People in the industry, folks who'd been there since the start, started worrying. The fall from mega success to struggling solo act had happened so fast, and it hit hard. Nobody was sure if Ronnie would find that fire again, the one that lit up honky-tonks in Texas way back when. The doubts kept piling up. Did I screw up leaving Brooks and Dunn? Was it dumb to think I could? Do this solo? Does my voice even matter anymore? That inner spiral just kept spinning, dragging him down. By 2014, Ronnie Dunn was at rock bottom, at least professionally. The guy who used to pack arenas and top charts was now sitting in silence, wondering if that chapter of his life had closed for good. But sometimes, the most profound transformations happen when everything else falls away. What if losing everything was exactly what Dunn needed to find himself again? Redemption and revival. Funny enough, the big turning point didn't happen in some fancy studio or massive concert hall. It happened on a quiet little farm in Tennessee. Ronnie Dunn was just out there, away from all the noise. No label people breathing down his neck. No pressure from radio. No one expecting anything. And for the first time in a long time, he just wrote. With no plan, no audience in mind, just him and his guitar, like he was catching up with an old friend he hadn't seen in forever. And something clicked. The songs that came out of that stretch were different, way more raw, way more honest than what he'd been doing when he was chasing radio hits. There was no pressure to land on the charts or win awards. It was just about writing songs that felt true, songs that healed, that meant something. That reminded him of why he even fell in love with music in the first place. He ended up putting a bunch of those songs into his 2014 album, Peace, Love, and Country Music. It didn't blow up or anything, but that wasn't the point. What mattered was that it felt real. It felt like him. It was a total 180 from those big, arena-sized anthems he used to belt out. Smaller sound, way more personal, way more free. And then he made a move nobody saw coming. He started his label, just like that. No more middlemen, no more gatekeepers. Total control over his music, his time, his vision. It gave him space to help out younger artists, too. Folks trying to figure out how to stay true to themselves in a business that loves to smooth the edges off everything. At the same time, Kix Brooks was out there doing his own thing. He'd jumped into radio, hosting American Country Countdown. And it suited him, honestly. He got to stay close to the music he loved, sharing stories behind the songs every week, connecting old-school fans with newer stuff. The radio booth became this chill little stage where he could just talk. And man, Kix can talk. His love for country music and all its history just poured out of him. He also dabbled in acting, small films, nothing huge, but enough to scratch that creative itch. It wasn't about fame or anything. He just wanted to try new stuff. Keep growing. Then, in 2014, during one of their usual dinners, they still hung out even after splitting. The idea of doing a Vegas residency came up. It wasn't like some big comeback plan. It was more like, hey, what if we just played again? Nothing crazy, just them, some songs, a great venue, and no tour buses. Reba McEntire ended up inviting them to join her at Caesar's Palace. The Coliseum was a total dream spot. Amazing acoustics, super intimate vibe. And they didn't have to bounce from city to city anymore. They could just be there, perform, go home, have dinner with their families. It felt like winning the dang lottery. For Ronnie, who was still kind of unsure about his place in the whole country music scene, it was a big deal. Like, do people still care about what I have to say? That first show in 2015 answered it loud and clear. The crowd was there. The chemistry between them is still electric, maybe even better than before. And the cool part was, they weren't promoting a new record. There was no pressure. So they used that time to experiment, tweak the set list, play around with arrangements, just enjoy performing again. Ronnie said that singing at the Coliseum was different. He could hear his voice, not through giant speakers, not with stadium echoes, but up close, raw. It reminded him that he still had it. He belonged on that stage. That whole experience laid the foundation for something pretty wild, the reboot albums. The idea was simple but bold. Take some of their biggest hits and let today's country stars reimagine them however they wanted. No rules, just fresh takes on classic tracks. The first reboot dropped in 2019, and it hit way harder than anyone expected. Luke Combs crushed Brand New Man, and Kane Brown's version of Believe somehow felt both new and true at the same time. By 2024, Reboot 2 was pushing things even further. Jelly Roll showed up with a 70-piece orchestra and a 30-person choir to redo Believe, turning it into this massive gospel-tinged powerhouse that filled the whole studio like a church revival. Then there was Megan Moroney's take on Ain't Nothing 'Bout You. She flipped the vibe entirely. Super slow, smoky, late-night kind of energy. Even Brooks and Dunn were very surprised. They'd toured with her for 2 years and had never heard that side of her. But maybe the most telling one was Morgan Wallen's version of Neon Moon. He barely changed a thing, and that said a lot. It showed how timeless the original was, how sometimes the best way to honor a song is just to let it breathe. The Reboot albums weren't just fun collabs. They worked. Big time. They brought in a whole new generation of fans while keeping the old ones happy. Proof that great songs don't age, they just evolve. Then, in 2024, out of nowhere, Brooks and Dunn won CMA's Vocal Duo of the Year. Everyone was shocked. But honestly, it made sense. They'd come full circle. After everything, the split, the solo journeys, the doubts, the growth, they'd found their way back. Not just to each other, but to why they started doing this in the first place. For Ronnie, all those years of wondering if he still mattered finally made sense. He hadn't lost himself. He'd just gotten buried under all the noise and expectations. Once all that stuff was stripped away, what was left was real. Just a guy with a guitar and something honest to say. And that is where the music lives. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Also, check out another interesting video by clicking on the video shown on your screen. See you on the other side.